Precis, de har öppnat senast igår så vi kan sitta på föreläsaren. Det ska vara
Nu är klockan 13 och vi välkomnar er alla. Labradorklubbens styrelse är här allihopa och vi gläder oss åt att se så många utav er komma hit till denna konferensen. Vi har besökare både från Norge och Danmark dessutom. Och det är snart 10 år sedan som vi hade den stora konferensen som om man jämför med denna som vi hade på Skokloster. Men vi är ännu fler idag och det gläder oss oerhört. Vi hälsar våran moderator, högt aktad och respekterad i alla lägen. Och du är lärare så du kan också hålla reda på publik och allting. Vi hälsar dig hjärtligt välkommen.
Det brukar bero på hur besvärlig klassen är, men i det här fallet är det väl inga problem. I'm delighted to welcome Richard Edwards, who has kindly agreed to come and talk about the development of the breed. And I know he's very eager to start. We've already lost 15 minutes, which we will make up for. And even though we want to adhere to the timetable, it is also somewhat flexible. So the stage is yours, sir.
Thank you. Can I try and notice?
Of course.
Wait a minute. Thank you for coming. Yeah, go on. Would that be better? I prefer it like that. They can't see it. Well, okay, that's fine. I'm happy. I'm happy like this. Are you happy like this?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Everyone's here. Just call me, otherwise
Yeah, fine, thank
okay,
you.
good luck.
Right, thanks for coming. When Dan asked me, firstly, give me a few slides to get going. I'll be stuttering all over the place, but usually I'm all right once I get going. I'm very nervous. I always am. I'm still nervous when I judge. I've been judging since 1972. Right, when Dan asked me to do this question, I agreed. It's all right. It's a long time away, so you don't. I thought it'd be very straightforward. In fact, I found it more difficult. I've got plenty of information. It's not that. I really tried to make a story of it, sort of beginning, a middle, and an end. To try and make a story of it, and that's the bit I found difficult to sort of make the story. Anyway, we'll have to go with what I've got. I tell you, also please, I would much prefer not to interrupt me. I'm perfectly happy to answer any questions if you write them down so you don't forget them. I'll talk as much as you want to downstairs tonight, as much as you want to. As long as you're willing to stay up, I'll talk. Right? I mean it. So I'm quite happy to do that after. But if firstly I've got too much, and secondly, once you throw me, I'd struggle to get back on track again. I tell you also that I know a lot less about the field trial lines than I do about the show lines. I make that quite clear. I'm not totally ignorant, but I know a lot more about the show lines. Also, most of this content relates to the United Kingdom, because a lot of it is history anyway, so it is the Labrador within the United Kingdom for the most part, not all of it. I have started basically, once we get through a few introductory ones, I've started basically about 1880. There's a specific reason for this, which will become clear as we go through. But it is likely that the breed, not necessarily in the form we know it, but more like St. John's water dogs, have been in England since about 1800. They've been there at least 200 years. Although the evidence is patchy, there is enough very clear, specific evidence that they've been there 200 years. Okay. I've called it type, evolution and change, but really I think there should probably be a question mark after the evolution and change. And then Dan did say to me, could you talk about when the working type and the show type diverge? So that's the sort of subplot, if you want, or the subtitle of the talk. Yes. Basically, the sort of questions I'm trying to go through is what is meant by type? Who established the modern Labrador type? What is the purpose of the breed, which might sound obvious, but in fact is not always what we think it is. Type, the field trial Labrador and the show Labrador. The yellow show Labrador, if I have time, because I find that particularly interesting. And should type be sacrosanct in the sense that is type something which is sort of sacred that you should never change or move on from. Yeah. Actually, type is incredibly difficult to define. It's incredibly difficult to define. It's very difficult to say in words what a Labrador is. It is not. It is much easier to say what a Labrador isn't. Countess Howe, she tries to do it and she fails. This is her famous book, The Popular Labrador Retrieved in 1957. It's out of date now, completely out of date, because she was looking back from the 1950s, so she was looking back right to the turn of the century. But it's still an important document historically, a very important document. And she writes, a Labrador in appearance is a more heavily built dog than is the flat-coated retriever. We'll come back to this. When I mean heavily, I do not mean the dog should be clumsy or common. He should certainly be wider in the chest than the flat-coat, with a good spring of ribs. His head should be broad across the eyes and the skull, but not cheeky. His ears should be set close to the head and not in any way reminiscent of the collie. There should be a definite stop, and the dog should not be down-placed as a bull terrier, nor dish-nosed as the pointer should be. The light whippet type of dog is definitely wrong. Basically, what she's saying is what it isn't. It's not any of them, but she doesn't tell you what it is. And this is actually quite a big problem. Everybody thinks so, wouldn't it? Right, the great Mary Rosalind Williams, the one and only. She really was very important. She was a fantastic character, unbelievable. She wrote the wonderful book, The Dual Purpose Labrador, which is still, for me, the best book written about the breed to this day. I think it's great. You learn so much from it, and even though you think you know everything, you go back and read it again, you think, oh yeah, it's a good way of putting it. I mean, she tries to define type, and she fails too, basically. She says that as long as you're able to distinguish a Labrador from another breed, you understand type, basically well. Yeah. Then she talks about this thing called correct type, right, which is good. Unfortunately, she doesn't say what it is, right? Because it's impossible to say in words. She says what it isn't. And then, finally, I'll come back to this little one here. She says, a Labrador should look, this famous statement everybody quotes at you, a Labrador should look like a Labrador and nothing else. It reminds you of any other breed, it's not true type. She hasn't told you where it is. No, look back, please. Back. There we are, thanks. This little bit here is quite interesting. What she says there basically is about strain. She talks about kennel type. And that's quite interesting. If I have time, I would like to talk about that too. In other words, some long-standing breeders within the breed develop their own sort of Labrador. It's called a strain, effectively, but it still doesn't tell you what type is. And interestingly, I mean, that picture is whatever it was. I'll shake now because you'll have to forgive me. But if you look at their heads, right, straight away, they are not Labradors as we understand them today, right? They are flat-coated heads, yeah? So it's interesting that even her own picture, which is the one she uses on a card, she sent it to a postcard and things, are not what we understand today as type. So the thing moves along, it changes in time. Right. Type and the breed standard. Actually, the breed standard is very, very important. It tells you nothing about type. It does not tell you about what a Labrador is. It gives you a description, but it could apply to lots of breeds. If you didn't have the word Labrador on the top, you might struggle to decide which breed it was. Mary Rosalind Williams used to tell a story. She used to go to lots of open shows, the small-scale shows. We still have, but they were much more important in the past. We used to have them in conjunction with county shows and country shows where people showed their horses and everything, It was great. And she reckoned she picked up one day a standard on the way out. And it was ripped, so she only had most of it. She didn't have the heading. She had all these stories. Whether they're true, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. And she picked up and she looked at the standard, and all the way home, her and her daughter were trying to work out what it was, and they decided it was a Doberman. Anyway, when they got home, they showed it to somebody, a farmer, and he said, no, that's a so-and-so sort of cow. Whether it's true, I don't know. But breed standards of themselves are very, very important, but they don't tell you much about type. I put 4 dogs up here. One was obviously, even, for example, to a totally untrained eye, on the street, somebody would say the black dog is not a Labrador. He actually was registered a Labrador, but he's probably a sort of old wavy coat, somewhere in between the flat coat and the Labrador. The one on the bottom, this, for me, is very foreign. The dog in the middle is from the 1930s. The yellow dog in the middle is from the 1930s. And this dog is, for me, extremely hungry. Very, very fox hungry. And this lady, I forget her name now, in a sub kennel, I think it was something like that, very foreign. The dog on the end is a very famous British champion from the 1960s, a very famous British breeder, and he is, to me, so foreign that it's worrying. I'll come back to him later if we have time. But look at him. I mean, he is such a good Labrador until you notice, and this is where type is such, this is where the breed standard doesn't tell you a lot. He is very heavily masked through the nose and the lips. That masking is not a Labrador characteristic. He has very, very clean outline and what looks at a very light, straight, thin coat. He has a piece of dowling like you use to, move a brush about, a thin hole, yeah, for an otter tail. His back end is clearly not a Labrador, and he has a foxhound back end, and he has round bone down on a very tight feet, which is not Labrador bone. Yeah? So, to an extent, when you are looking at type, a lot depends on how good you are at looking. And a couple of things here, I don't go on too long on this slide, but a couple of things. Firstly, we used to, when I was a kid, because my parents were involved in breeding in dogs, not Labrador, but dogs, I've been going since in the pram, 70 years, to shows and dog activities. We used to go to these open shows around the South Wales valleys. They were like 20, 30 class open shows. You'd have one judge and you'd have like 2 or 3 classes or 2 classes for each breed and whatever. And you'd have to sit there, bored stiff as a kid, as you can imagine, sit there looking at all the other breeds, the terriers, the hounds in their couple of classes. And it sort of sinks in over time, You see these other breeds and it sinks in that there are different types of dogs. And one of the things that so many people are very good people, are very good Labrador breeders at home don't do now, is look at other breeds. They just don't look at other breeds at all. They only look at their own breed. And you learn a heck of a lot from looking at other people's other breeds. You learn a lot about your own breed. I mean, we share a flat, so all I've got at the moment is a flat-coated retriever, which we share. And he has taught me so much about, I didn't realise about flat coats. I'm thinking back, I go back then and think about Labradors. And the other thing I would say here is, in the 1960s, my mentor was a lady called Mrs. Henrietta Williams Nokina, very famous lady in her day, and she was my mentor and she helped me no end. She was very, very good with me, very patient with me. And one day in an open show, I said something about a dog called Clyde Ruth Harvester. It was a very, very important dog in the history of the yellow Labrador. Of course, he lived in Abergavenny where we live, and she lived in Brecon, just up the road. And so it was a local show, and I must have said something a bit, I just said something stupid. And she said, no, look at the dog. And she took this dog to pieces, from the tip of his nose to the tip of his tail. She ripped him apart, right? And I was sort of flabbergasted. Firstly, because I didn't realise you could look at a dog that closely, right? That all the bits you could look at in such detail. And secondly, I said to her, but Mrs. Williams, she was the same age as my parents, so I never called her sis. Mrs. Williams, I thought you liked the dog. I do, dear. I'm going to use it. And she did. And out of that later came Cornan's Nokina Highlight to win the CC at Crufts. But you see, that was her, and it was good because it taught me you can see, there's a lot more to see than just a glance. And that I had a great deal to learn, which I still do. We all do all the time, yeah? Right. Is this the next page? Yes, it is, sorry. Right, you must recognise that for many of the early Labrador owners, type as such was much more related to function than to looks. Obviously, looks relate to function, but function includes character and working ability. They were more concerned about the character traits and the working ability than they were about looks. Looks are obviously important because you are sticking within the breed. You have to stick within the breed or you lose the working character or the character and the working ability. So you have to stick in as a breed. You have to stick with the breed, but they weren't that concerned in the beginning with looks. And so function, character, and working ability were far, far more important. Even to the extent that flat-coated people who were much more important at this time than the Labrador people, I'm talking about 1900 or before, they were get really annoyed with the Labrador people because they say, like, it's not fair. They're actually like little kids, really. It's not fair. They don't care how good their dogs look as long as they work. It's not fair because we try and make our flat coats look beautiful as well as working, and they don't care if they're ugly. And they used to call the Labradors yard dogs, which is a real insult. I mean, it's a real farmyard dogs, yard dogs. Also, for many of the earliest people, shows were either seen as irrelevant, like at least the time I don't do shows, or actually a ruination. They saw shows as ruining their breed, and they did not want the breed to get involved in shows at all because it was good. So who's diverged? Now, and I know I said earlier, I mean, you all know what the purpose of Labrador is, but basically, the main purpose of the breed, especially in England here too, really, in a sense, anywhere in the world, it's working ability in terms of picking up dead and wounded game, especially if there's water involved on our estates, because the birds can either find game you can't find, or find game in dangerous places, or over water, or whatever. And the rule, obviously, is that you, with the anti-field sports that we have at home, and I'm sure you have here, you must make absolutely sure that every single bird is picked, because there is no excuse for allowing a wounded bird to go away and die in agony. There is no excuse for that. And that's the one thing that the antis would love if they could find it. I remember talking to Tess Lawrence, and once a very, very famous field trial lady at home, and she proudly told me that they'd shot on the Duke of Devonshire's estate, and they shot 100 grouse, and they picked up 95, and then they went back and found another 4, and then they went back and back and back, and eventually the dog found the other one. And we picked up all 100, and she was really, really proud of this. But you shouldn't leave them there. So in this sense, that's what the Labrador does. Field trials, working tests, and shows are just specialised offshoots of the genuine work of the Labrador. And in a sense, field trials, working tests, and shows, by their specialisation, will tend to exaggerate, and this is what's happened over the years. So that's that point. Yeah. When things come up in blue, all of this, right? Fine. I haven't said that. I shouldn't start. All of this is my interpretation. Right? I'm not telling you what. I'm just telling you what I think. And when they come up in blue, this is definitely my interpretation. Basically, what I think I'll try and argue is that the type of black Labrador developed by the early breeders has remained broadly intact, depending how close you study. Especially when you remember the length of time involved. I'm not talking about yellows, I am talking about blacks, only blacks. And if you can, try and suspend your judgment for a while of the early dogs. Don't think about the dogs you see in the show ring or the field trial today, or the working field, or not the working field, but working test, whatever today. Try and suspend that for about 125 years, go back to the start and be open-minded about it. Yeah? Right. The other thing which comes through this very clearly is the role of Lorna Countess Hull in looking after the breed from 1916, possibly a little bit earlier, but 1916 was when the Labrador Retriever Club was formed in the United Kingdom. Oh, sorry, well, England really. Yeah, it is. It's called the English because it's got the Welsh clubs now and everything. So, but it's actually the Labrador Retriever Club. So it is the British club in a sense. It's the senior club. Although the Kennel Club don't recognise it as such, everybody else does. Right, firstly, you have to accept that these were very different days. Very, very different days. There were far, far fewer Labradors than there are today. It is difficult to explain to people that, my own parents involved as well, in the early 60s we could not give Labradors away. You could not find homes for them. They were so unknown as a breed in Britain. And I mean, Henrietta Williams, Sis Williams, couldn't sell it. I mean, she lived in a very isolated place. And she just couldn't sell them. I remember my father buying some off at £3 each, and selling them for £4 each or £5 each. We lived on the main road, and they were passing people and whatever. And she was absolutely delighted just to get rid of them because they were eating so much food by this stage. So there are far fewer Labradors than today. The Labradors only became popular in Britain in the 60s, really. The other thing about this is that Countess Hull's rule was not democratic. There was no messing about with her. What she said went. And it was the whole breed. She ran the breed, literally. Ran the whole breed. It was not democratic at all. She was formidable. She was wealthy. Well, she was when she married. We'll come to that in a minute. She was wealthy. And she was very powerful with the English establishment, especially when she married Earl Howe as his third wife. The other two had died, to be fair to him. He was a widower. He was a member of the establishment. He was involved with royalty. He was a member of the royal household, the controller of expenses or something. I mean, the guy was right in at the centre. Once she'd gone, after 1961, it's a little bit earlier actually because she was ill for the last couple of years, but once she had gone, things changed. Something about the yellow Labradors, if I can get round. Right, that's the introduction. Right then? Thanks. Just briefly, a couple of brief slides. You've all seen these slides. These are basically St. John's water dogs. Early ones. Sorry. 1856, so we're talking sort of 120 years ago roughly. They've got the telltale white toes and everything. Yep. And again, this is the famous Avon, who was basically one of the stars of the Buccleuch kennel. You got somebody? Sorry. Yeah, cool. Now then, I just briefly, because if again I have time, we'll talk about some outcrossings. Where did the Labrador or the St. John's Water Dog, now 1856, get from there down to this dog, Taggart Whitmore, who won the championship 1918, I think, I'm not sure. Clearly a modern Labrador. Was it selective breeding or the introduction of another breed? Particularly through the literature, there's a very clear theme, all sorts of places, that black pointers were introduced within the breed in the Scottish, in the Scottish border country and the Tyne Valley in order to improve them. And next slide. This is one of the pointers that was at this point is an example of a pointer housed at the Herschel, which is right up on the border of England and Scotland, the Earl of Holmes estate at Coldstream, and Ely in the History of Retrievers says the Scottish aristocracy owned strains of pointers, and he suggests they used it. And there have been other crosses down the years. But, right, I'll try and come back to some of that if we have time. Basically, the people who established the modern Labrador type, in my opinion, start with the Buccleuchs in roughly 1880, down through Munden, Arthur Holland Hibbert, the breeders of the Tyne Valley, especially field trial champion Flapper, or came to sort of fruition in Flapper. The Butters, Dungarvel, which are basically the Duchess of Hamilton, the Whitmore kennel of Mr. Twyford, and of course Countess House Bankery. And this stretches really from, well, up to her death in 1961, roughly from 1880. Okay. Right. There's some interesting. Look, there were lots of Labradors in Britain, but all over the place. But the people who actually brought this breed out into the open and fostered it and benefacted it, if that's what you want to use the word, I think mainly are these people, because these are the names that crop up if you go through the Kennel Club Gazette, the Register, which I do. You know, you go and sit in London and go literally down the columns, inch by inch, looking for the names. These are the people that keep coming home. It's difficult to know where to start, but basically you start, I suppose, down in the bottom corner there, and at Poole. This is where all the literature, the sort of received wisdom comes from, that the Labrador came into Britain at Poole, roughly from about 1800 on, and that the boats were, there was a big trade between Poole and Newfoundland. And they came on the boats, basically as a sideline, really. Well, there are two versions. The Earl of Malmesbury is supposed to have seen these dogs in the water and whatever one day when he was in Poole, and thought they would be ideal for my estate because he lived on the coast and he shot a lot of wildfowl, and he saw these things retrieving from water, so I have one of those, and that's one story. But the captains certainly were bringing them in as a sideline, and they were making money out of them, bring a couple over and sell on at Poole. But also places like Greenock up there in the Clyde, and down here, Berwick and Newcastle on Tyne, they also traded with Newfoundland, and dogs almost certainly came in there as well. But the people in Dorset were the Malmesburys, the Radcliffes, the Wimbornes, and the Guests. And in Arthur Holland Hibbert's record book, which is still there at London, there's a great big thing, page after page of it, where he got, like a scrapbook really, where he kept bits and pieces. There's a piece in there saying, Colonel Radcliffe told me, this is the piece was put in about 1930, Colonel Radcliffe told me that his father and his grandfather were buying dogs at Poole as far back as 1830. So, that's the one. Then we have here, Munden, it's just outside London, it should be about there somewhere, but Arthur Holland Hibbert, just a bit further north at Gorhamby, the Earl of Verulam, which I can't get my tongue around. The Tyne Valley, which is incredibly important, the Tyne Valley runs roughly from Newcastle to Carlisle. It's the A69 basically, road is still there, and if you drive down the old road, it's dual carriageway now, bypasses. But you can actually see the village names where some of these, these people lived who had the dogs, who developed the dogs in the first place. So the Tyne Valley is very important. Just at the end of the Tyne Valley, there is Netherby, there are the Grahams, Sir Richard Graham in particular. Just north at Langholm, not far north actually, just over the border, is Langholm, which is one of the many estates of the Dukes of Buccleuch. To this day, they are still the biggest landowners, private landowners in England. Britain. And just to the west of Carlisle was Sir Wilfrid Lawson and his keeper Andrew Nichol, who was a very, very important man. Because, as you will see in a moment, some of the most important people in the development of the breed weren't just the aristocracy, because they paid their keepers to look after the dogs. And it was the keepers who did the work, really. I'm not saying the aristocracy weren't talking, saying, well, I'd like that dog mated to that dog, but it was the keepers who did the work. Right, look back. Right, try and tie these things together. The red lines are where the dogs went, basically. The red lines where the Earl of Malmesbury in particular gave the Duke of Buccleuch dogs 1840s or something, but the big time was about 1878, 1880. So dogs came from the south to the Buccleuchs. In 1858, a man called James Craw moved from the work of the Earl of Home at Coldstream to work for Sir Richard Graham. And he had been born in 1818, he was called James Craw, and he took 2 Labradors with him. So that was the start of the Netherby's, and of the Grahams of Netherby's, Labradors. And here at Brayton, Sir Wilfrid Lawson had a daughter, Ellen. And this is the brown one. In 1884, Arthur Holland Hibbert married Ellen Lawson. This is all family. This whole lot is family. They all know each other. Sir Richard Graham Netherby, daughter, married the Earl of Verulam. And Sir Richard Graham gave his son-in-law a Labrador. And in 1884, the year that Holland Hibbert married Ellen, Holland Hibbert bought a Labrador, his first Labrador, of the Earl of Verulam. Added to this, the Earls of Home, the Dukes of Buccleuch, the Netherbys, the Malmesburys. This is English aristocracy. Now, you don't marry out unless you need money, of course. But if you have money, you don't marry out, you marry each other. Right? This way you keep the money together, you keep the estates together, and you don't, it doesn't wander off into the wrong hands. If everybody's really, really poor, then obviously, if you've lost all the money or somebody's gambled it all away your dad, then you're allowed to marry a rich American heiress. And she comes over with the money and she gets the title. Yeah? But this lot all knew each other. They all knew each other, they were all involved, and these were the people who brought the Labrador to the fore. Yep. Right, the Buccleuchs. John Kerr's contribution to the recreation of the Buccleuchs. In about 1878, the early reference, but about 1880, Lord George Scott, who was the younger brother of he was the second son of the 5th Earl of Buccleuch, Duke of Buccleuch, who was about to die. He was an old man anyway in 1884. So Lord George Scott's brother became the 6th Duke of Buccleuch. But it was Lord George Scott, and the book Scott and Middleton, the Labrador dog, is written by Lord George Scott. Lord George Scott was really most interested in the dogs, and he asked John Kerr to put the kennel of Labradors back together, because apparently there were some there, but they were a mixed lot. They weren't much good, and he said to John Kerr, I would like you to build up a kennel of Labradors like we used to have, and I would like you to do it such that each keeper, and there were a lot of keepers, each keeper has 2 or 3 dogs of his own. He's responsible for them, and then they can breed on and keep the thing going themselves. It'll self-develop. Okay. John Kerr's actually, I say he's on the far left. I think probably. I reckon. I'm not sure. I think actually thinking about it, I think that's him in the middle, because he's got the male dog. The other's a picture out of soon. On the other hand, he looks a lot like him, and this one looks a lot, could easily be either his son or his son. Yeah? And obviously, it is a family thing. Keeping was a family thing, and you pass the skills on down the generations. But this guy, Kerrs, who's pretty much forgotten by most people, not me, but pretty much forgotten by most people in Labradors, actually was the man who built the Buccleuch kennels of the Buccleuch kennel at Langholm of Labradors, which is the absolute rock-solid one of the rock-solid basis upon which the modern breed developed. Buccleuch is and he started a stud book in it, and the first one is the dog was born 1878, I think, and the book is still available. Well, you can find the copies, but it was Kerrs who was doing the book, and the book starts at the time when Lord George Scott said, I want you to set the kennel up and redevelop the kennel that's gone downhill. And the first 3 pages of the book are all him getting dogs in from places. like from the Malmesburys, from the Lord Ruthven, from the Duke of Hamilton, from various places around. He's buying in dogs. And by the time you get to about 1890, he's not buying in anymore. He's got enough stuff now, he's got enough bloodlines, and from then on in, he's just building his own lines based on he's breeding his own litters based on his own dogs, with a very occasional buying in a dog from somewhere else, usually one son or daughter of a dog they'd given. Because they gave their dogs, or sold their dogs, in the main they gave their dogs to the rest of the English aristocracy. They sold a few, but all down the notes on the side of the cloister, there's a notes where the dogs went to on each litter. And you can see Lord so-and-so, Earl so-and-so, Viscount so-and-so. And you know, they all knew each other, there's absolutely no doubt about it. They still do, they all know each other today, and they don't bother with the rest of us. Right. A slight exaggeration, but I tell you, there's still very big social class differences in England. Massive. And the aristocracy still, although they've had to give in to new money, as you always do, you've got to refresh it. Right. About what I try to argue through this is that a particular campaign, I think it was led by Arthur Holland Hibbert, Lord Knutsford, with the Munden Kennel. He had decided that Labradors were far better at work than any other breed, and field trials were just starting. And once field trials start, not quite yet, but once field trials start, he would then be able to put the Labradors in the field against the flat-coated retrievers, and he knew that they would beat them easily. Right? He knew this, or at least, well, he's supposed to. He was absolutely right. So I think what he did was to try and get well, he did. He launched basically a campaign to try and bring the breed out into the public domain. Right. There are two very important magazines. They're still there today in England, but they were not in Britain. They are much more important at this time than they are now. The Field and Country Love. They're still there, but in the old days, the Field did very, very detailed accounts of everything happening in the country. Really detailed accounts of horse racing, hunting, shooting. And this is the first article, May 30th, 1896, that I can find relating to Labrador dogs in a national newspaper, because this was a national newspaper. And what happened basically is, I think, Arthur Holland, because in London they wouldn't have known who John Kerrs was, head keeper at Langham. But Arthur Holland Hibbert probably said to the editor of the Field, look, why don't you do an article on, this is what I think, on Labrador dogs. You know, they come in, they're really good breed, they come in breed. I know the bloke who can write it for you, he's called John Kerrs. And John Kerrs actually had some photographs taken and sent these photographs to London. I'll come back to you after a minute for the next one. And I just got this from a German magazine, I don't know why, because it's material. But he sent these photographs down, and a very famous illustrator called Arthur Wardle, because the Field were not using photographs yet, they're using illustrations. He drew up this drawing, and as you can see, it's dreadful. I mean, when you talk about type, he really gets it wrong. I mean, he gets it wrong big time. Go to the next one, please, for a minute. And this is what I love when you're doing research and things, because when you look at a lot of the research has done a lot of things, including Labradors. All somebody does who writes the book is to go back to the last book and say what they say, right? And they've gone back to the last book and said what they say. And, so they just repeat it. They're not doing the research on their own. But this is from that step book I told you about in Menden House, his scrapbook, and it's actually signed on here, AHH 1890, well, 6 it is, he got a blot. And it's Arthur Holland Hibbert had written in 1896 on the very article he stuck in the book, this article from the Field, saying, John Kerrs told me that the above was but a poor likeness, particularly poor of Avon, looking like an ordinary flat-coated retriever. And it's quite interesting because there was a lot of tension between the lab people and the flat-coat people. An ordinary flat-coat, you know what I mean? So he's got it wrong. Actually, Wardle later did some superb illustrations. Can we go back to the article?
The article's next.
No, the article's come. Yeah, it is next. Sorry. I'll read it because you can't read it from me. Let me read it. What John Kerrs did was brilliant. Instead of writing, I'm the big man, I know all about Labradors. He said he wrote the thing around this man called James Craw. This is the man that moved to Netherby in 1858 to bring dogs with him. from Coldstream to Sir Richard Graham at Netherby. So Craw lived just over the border in Scotland, and he lived in a little cottage called Stelshaw Cottage. And if you look at some of the early pictures of Labradors, this Stelshaw is a prefix that used. It's from his cottage. We're talking 1890s. And he says, in course of conversation, which is how I'm reading that, in course of conversation with old James Craw, now 80 years of age, well, I think he was born in 1818 from the censuses, so he would have been 78, but whatever, but he's an old man. You talk about a man born in 1818, whom the writer met the other day, and was for many years keeper at Herschel and Netherby, and I believe knows more about Labrador dogs than any living man. So he's very clever, basically. I'm not doing it. I've been to see James Craw. He's very experienced. He knows more about Labradors than anybody else. He described the old strains as rather larger than the modern Labrador and said that the head should be flattish and long. The ears should be well set up on the head, not rising above the cantle. The cantle is this area across here, which is an old Scottish word for that area across there. And you have cantles on saddles. Or, they call it a cantle. It's the same thing across. And so the ears shouldn't come up. They should lie close to the cheek. They should be small and V-shaped. The eyes should be black, neither hazel nor grey being correct. Grey is quite interesting because I am convinced that the St. John's water dogs were taken to Newfoundland by the Portuguese, and they are based on the dogs of the village of Labrador. They're Labraderos, and the Labraderos have the weirdest grey and white eyes. They're really weird colour eyes. And some of the Labradors, I can remember people going in the showroom with very grey eyes in the 60s. I mean, they get put down usually, but I mean, it's still cropped up. I haven't seen it for years. The roof of the mouth should be black and the neck rather strong. There's a story that Mrs. Wormold reckoned that a chow had got to one of her Labradors, and they called it the chow. And when people opened his mouth in shows, of course, his mouth was all black because they reckoned it was a chow. In fact, I think it may just have been a throwback to the water dogs. But apparently people used to do it, used to try and take it in the show. When people and shut their mouth again, she thought it was funny. Right, let me stop interrupting. The roof of the mouth should be black and the neck rather strong. The legs should be straight and the feet fairly round and the ribs well sprung. They should be fairly strong in the loins with the thighs well let down. The tail should be straight and strong like that of an otter, should have no fringe and should not on any account be curved. A strong, straight coat without wave and thick undercoat. Colour is mostly black. These are the essential marks of purity, but some of the old strain had brindle legs, which comes from the Labraderos. They are brindles. And yellow-coloured dogs are sometimes to be seen. And clearly, this was an old man, 1818 born, with a very clear idea of how we, too, would understand Labrador. Some of the detail might be a little bit different from how we see it. He also said, I've tried all kinds of retrievers and all kinds of game, and for sagacity, stamina, perseverance, quickness in nose, none can come up to the Labradors. The only fault I can find with some of them is they were a bit hard-mouthed. I don't know about that. I mean, maybe they were, but I mean, I see in this lovely thing that you have. There's a picture, in this lovely thing. There's a picture of a Labrador being hauled up from the sea on a rope. Yeah? So you get a bit hard-mouthed, wouldn't you? Because if you've got to get pulled up, you've got to hold on like, yeah? So maybe it's that. I don't know. So basically, this is the first piece of information, or if you want to, the first explanation, the first article, I think, in a British magazine. Should we go on there? Again, the keepers at Langholm. I don't know who they are, but the dog in the middle's moved his head. Very unfortunate time. It was interesting too. I did this talk for Northumberland Durham Labrador Club, and the first one where it's in the yard. A bloke in the audience said, I was there the other day, it hasn't changed at all. And it's quite likely, the yard is just as it was. These are the Buccleuchs, and these come from the Country Life article. They are very lovely. I think these are dogs from at least 120 years ago. They are very typical as we would understand it today. They don't represent some of the modern changes in the show ring, but in terms of their shape and their type and their shape and make, they are very, very typical. Their heads are more flat-coated than we are perhaps used to, and the ears are a bit big and they're a bit round for many of us. But these, to me, I think these are great. They look like really genuine, beautifully typical Labradors. Yeah. The clue guy, the one thing that definitely we have improved in terms of show terms and in terms of field trial lines the back ends have improved. There's nothing much doubt about that. And I can remember very clearly, as late as the 60s, some of the Labradors had very weak back ends. So please don't think, or don't let anybody convince you that all the old dogs are wonderful and your modern dogs are rubbish, because I can tell you, it's not true. Some of the old dogs were awful. They really were. And if they were to come back, I mean, you know, some of the senior people know this. If they were to come back, they would. The best of them were wonderful, right? The absolute top of the cream. But underneath, there were many dogs in Britain who made a championship, especially in the show ring, who were very weak behind. Yeah. These are lovely. I mean, it's just, these are sort of, if they're veterans in 1890s, they're just superb. Lovely long heads. I love the long-headed dogs. And these wonderful, they're just lovely. It's just, you know, they exude Labrador temperament and type to me. You know. I love this picture, not least, and I will come back to it, because this particular dog here reminds me very of the working, especially of some of the working dogs that you even see to this day. They sit just like that, and they look just like that, and nothing really has changed. And this is why my argument is that the black types are stuck with us, yeah? I love this, just for his tail, even. I can remember otter tails, you don't see them quite like that now, but there's still lots of otter tails there. But they would be as thick as that at the base, they used to be like that. A man could just get his hand around them, and they would go right to a point, sort of, you know, sharp point, and they were hard. They weren't little bits of string. And when they walked past you and hit you on the leg, it hurt. Honestly, I'm not exaggerating, you could feel it. You know, and they have to be like that if they're going to be any use as a rudder. You know, if they're going to be any use as a rudder, they're not little bits of wobbly, you know. This is actually a slightly later one than the others. But Country Life started to do these they're usually 3-page spreads. They got in a professional photographer called Reed from Glasgow to take the photographs. And the paper, they were quite big, they weren't A4, they were bigger size than that. And they were, the paper was beautiful quality. And so the magazine, you know, the articles looked lovely. These are where I've got these pictures from, okay? Right, go on to the breeders of the Tyne Valley. The people along the Tyne, in the most of the rest of the United Kingdom, especially in the south, they were using flatcoats. They were using flatcoats and they were very proud of them because not only were they working dogs, but they were handsome. And they were very, very insistent upon dual-purpose Labradors that had to look good as well as work. Up along the Tyne Valley and in the border country, which actually is where the Labrador was made, as far as I'm concerned, they were using Labradors. There were flatcoats there, but they were using Labradors. And the names, and many of these people are still there. Bates, who bred Flappers, Strakers, Little Fenwicks, Grahams and Netherby, and just north of the border, the Buccleuchs and Lord Cairns, whose names all appear on here. The early Malmesbury dogs, the Buccleuchs, Cairns, Littles, Barnes, Grimston was his courtesy title before he became the Earl of Verulam, I can't say it. Littles, Fenwicks, Strakers, these people, and the families are still there. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and she said, it wasn't the other day, it's when I did Northumberland talk. I used to work for the Strakers, and she said, the one, she said his name, Michael Straker, I think, he would love to see this stuff, because he's still very interested. Okay, this is Flapper, born 1902, bred by Colonel Bates of Hexham, which is the big town in the middle of the Tyne Valley, but not big town, the market town. And he was owned eventually by Maurice Portal. Only 4 trials, 2 seconds in 07, 2 firsts in 08, and 20 of his immediate progeny, his children, were awarded stud-book numbers for trial. And in a sense, it was Flapper who really, in another impetus of the breed, because he, as a worker, apparently he was absolutely brilliant. And people would say, oh, well, the Labradors, yeah, they're okay. Actually, they're not that good. The flatcoats will come back. It's just that Flapper's brilliant. And when he's gone, we'll regain our, but they never did. Yep. And this is lovely, because this is the other photo of Flapper, 1902. That's an 1819, dog of the New Lands, a Newfoundland dog in effect, and they are very similar in type. Newfoundland dog even has the white spits on his paws, on his feet. I think he's absolutely, dead ring of a dog. Yep. And interestingly, Flapper 1902 and Palgrave Edward, which I see is a picture in your nice history. I mean, what you have to remember here is these people are breeding working dogs. Right? They never go near a show. They're not considering type. They couldn't care less what type is. All they want is working ability. And what do they achieve? A consistency of type. And it's almost ironic that, you know, by not considering type, only going to the families where type, where the working ability is, in so doing, they maintain the type. Yeah. Right, let's go on to the Mundans. I love these. Again, I like long-headed Labradors. I'm not talking about weak, especially long-muzzled Labradors. I'm not talking about flat-toed heads or weak, but these, they are just, to me, they have much more dignity than the squashed-in faces of so many. I've got to be careful to record short faces of the Labrador today. I'm not bothered. I don't show Labradors anymore, and if they don't want me to judge them, fine, I don't care. I don't want to be sued, mate. Right. And again, this is 1902, Country Life 1902, and this is Arthur Holland Hibbert at his home at Mundon. Still there, obviously, his great-grandchildren is there now. The heir to the Viscount Viscount Wexford. Again, this is where I got the pictures from. This is Century that's in your book. The others, next one. They're lovely photographs, again, taken professionally. He's cleaned his boots too, I never noticed that before. Look how clean his shoes. Well, no, he didn't clean them. All right, okay. I hadn't noticed that before. See, honestly, this is the thing about you really need to look at photographs. So, there's so much there. Yeah. This is the cedars of Lebanon are still there. Those trees in the background, they're very slow growing and they're still there. And these they're lovely heads. These heads are lovely. That one's got a bit of skin trouble, I think. But look at this up here, right? This is showing off. There's what? There's 10 of them, I think. There's one that's gone round the corner. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Huh? He's told to sit and to stay there. You get 10 flackles to do that. Well, sorry. It's showing off. It's showing off. Honestly, the flackles are going to be too costly. But look, he's showing off. He's in complete control of 10 dogs. And he's leaning against a tree with his smoking his pipe. I think that, honestly, that's done purposely. He said to the guy, look, I can at least sit down, you go there and take a photograph. Go on. Please. Again, I mean, the heads, I think the heads are just stunning, but they are rounded in ear. They have rounded ears. And there are the cedars, okay? I'm not sure this is Mundon single, to be honest. I'm not sure about this. I'll have to check this. But again, it's these, Countess Howe in her book calls these the typical Mundon. Yep. This is lovely because there's the dog there, and that's Arthur Holland Hibbert there. And he says, to the everlasting grief of all who knew him, this splendid dog died August 1907, which I think is lovely. Yep. This is interesting. This is, again, one of the pictures that's used in many of the early books to show the Labrador head. This is from the Kennel Gazette, May 1908. It's an advert telling you what the dog has, has produced and what he's won, etc. But this is my opinion. I love the expression. The balance of the muzzle to the skull in terms of length and in strength is superb. The eye shape is lovely. This lovely fold back of ears to me is brilliant. I love that when the lads put their ears right back like that. It's lovely. It gives it expression. And the finish of the muzzle right to the end, it's not snipey. And a beautiful bone structure where you get this high quality bone structure with no lumps and bumps. The whole thing is just smooth all through. And I mean, it really, it's just brilliant. Yep. A couple of the others, obviously, from that article. One of the interesting things that many of the early St. John's water dogs ran up behind. The back end was higher, just ran up behind. A lot of the Chesapeakes run up behind. So I watched at Crufts this year, this year. I sat and watched the Chesapeakes being judged because I like the Chesapeakes. I think they're great. They're really sort of basic Labrador type, aren't they? Really, I mean, you never have a pretty Chesapeake, that's for sure. They're great. I really think they're brilliant. They have flattened the top lines out. The Chesapeake show breeders have flattened the top lines out. And I think it's a shame because this came from the St. John's water dogs. It's typical. And the Labradoros have this run up behind as well. The Portuguese dogs have this too. Yep. Well, Scotland's okay till you get about there. Yeah. Go on. Finally, Mundon Single got her own obituary in the Field magazine. When she died, she got her own obituary. First Labrador completing trials at the International Gun Dog League trial near Warwick, 1904. 17 flatcoats, 1 curly and Mundon, and she was awarded a certificate of merit, despite the fact that she made a bit of according to one report, she made a bit of a mess of a runner. According to another report, she mashed the bird up, i.e. she killed it. Right? But I don't think you get a certificate of merit these days. Right, we're a little bit of a break off that. In 1903, this lady called Eileen Cust. Very interesting it's a brilliant story. I'm not telling now, just a few bits of it. But she wrote to the Kennel Club asking them to recognise the Labrador as a separate breed. She said a few of them had been registered in the flag, and they had. They were already being registered in the flag coat register, and they were being shown in the flag coat classes, and some of them were winning in the flag coat classes. But she asked, basically, could they put them on a separate register? And the Kennel Club replied. Now, what you understand is that of the 10 people who were on the field trial, the Kennel Club field trial committee at this time, 5 at least, because I can count these 5, I can't do it with the others, but 5 of them I know to be flag-coated retriever breeders, right? And they said there were not enough of them in the country to warrant a separate register. It was rubbish. I mean, all right, they lived in the south and the dogs maybe in the north, but it was rubbish. There were plenty of Labradors in the country, and I guess they knew it. But what they did say was that they would put, the Kennel Club had their own show then, because Crufts was still being run by Mr. Cruft. So they had their own Kennel Club show, and a very important show, and they would put a class on, and if they turned up in enough numbers, they have a think, they think again. I've just come back, we'll go on to that in a minute, but this Eileen Cust was a member of the English aristocracy. She was, her brothers, her parents and her brothers were courtiers in London to the King and Queen. They were very much part of the British establishment, right inside the British establishment. And when she applied, well, basically she didn't have enough money, but then her brother died very young and left her £6,000. And she decided she'd go to Edinburgh Veterinary School. There were 2 at the time in Edinburgh. She'd go to one of the Edinburgh Veterinary Schools and become a vet. And this was absolutely, that was it. As far as the family concerned, that was it. They never wanted anything else to do with that ever again, and they didn't. And actually, she changed her name when she registered in the college, not to embarrass them, because they were in London with the Queen, King and Queen, and whatever. And at the start, she had a very rough time, apparently, and then she started winning the year prizes and everything. So she was accepted. She could do it, and then they accepted it. But interestingly, when she finished her 5 years or whatever it was at the vet school, she then had to apply to the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons in London, because unlike now where the qualification goes automatically, you had to separately apply. And they told her that they would not register her because she was not a person, she was a woman. I didn't say that, ladies, I didn't say that. They said that, right? And that's the truth. And she was told at the time, basically, if you take them to court, you'll win. But she didn't have the money, and they were a royal institution, and they could drag it out for years in the courts, take it through the courts, years. Right? So she gave up. She just went to Ireland, to Galway in Ireland, and practiced as a vet anyway. She was very, very feisty, formidable lady, a generation for her time. She lived, cohabited with another vet, though never married him, and you can imagine that, right? 100 years in Catholic Ireland, right? Living in sin, yeah? Living in sin. She never married him. Though I can't go on now because there's so much. It's brilliant. If you could go online and find out about her, she's brilliant. In the First World War, she drove her own car from Galway to France to look after the horses, where huge numbers of horses were killed. And they all knew it because she wasn't dining with the riffraff in the evening, she was dining with the brigadiers and the general. They knew who she was. But basically in 1922, there was an act of Parliament passed in the United Kingdom which said that no institution, royal or otherwise, could discriminate on the basis of sex. So they had then. She then applied to do their exams. And basically, from what I can understand, they basically said, well, come in and we'll have a chat. And they sat down, and they had a glass of sherry, and they said, yeah, okay. She never did the exam. It was called a viva, right? It was called an oral. But I reckon it was just a glass of sherry. Right, move on. Right, this is the class. This is class 150, Open Dogs and Bitches Labrador, though as you can see, it's actually under flat-coated retriever line. And look at them, look at them, look at them. Well, Miss Cust, then. Mr. Taylor and Mr. Taylor, he was a sidekick of Arthur Holland Hibbert because he had his dogs. And then you have Arthur Holland Hibbert, Arthur Holland Hibbert, Arthur Holland Hibbert, Arthur Holland Hibbert, Arthur Holland Hibbert. Then Sir Richard Graham from Netherby, Alec Craw, who was the son of James Craw, worked, Stelshaw Nell, Stelshaw Cottage, that's where they lived, worked for the Grahams. Smith worked for the Grahams, and Andrew Nichol worked for Sir Richard Lawson's Brayton. Right? So effectively, what's happened here, I think, the interpretation is, Arthur Holland Hibbert run round his mates, right, and said, we've got to fill this class. We need to fill this class. So there's 14 of them. And on the basis of that, the Kennel did recognise the Labrador. They didn't put it into they put them in as foreign dogs, which really infuriated the Labrador people. And 2 years later, they agreed they could be called retrievers. But interestingly, again, you see, the showing side of it was irrelevant as far as up to everybody we've talked to up till now, none of them were really interested in shows. And this is an article from Illustrated Sport and Dramatic News, 1908. And the author says, in conversation with the owner, he discovered himself to be no believer in dog shows, though he sometimes exhibit. His idea is to fix type and then retire from the showing. Obviously, why Labradors hold their own so wonderfully with the many thousands of other breeds is because they are bred for work and selected for what they can do, and not for what they look like. The way to improve is to breed the best from the best at work, and this has been recognised by many. All Arthur Holland Hibbert was doing was using shows to get the breed recognised and to get the type out there. Yep. Right, we're on to the Duchess of Hamilton, and some of her dogs are very, very nice. Dungarvel Jet particularly, she had bitches, and she mated some of her bitches to Flapper, and she was quite important in developing them. Though, I was thinking of calling this NNUTS, nuts, because nothing new under the sun, right? Juno was small and short on the leg. It's just right, okay. It's just the same in the days. Nothing new under the sun. All of these arguments have been wrong before, time and time again. Okay, this is lovely. This is Dungarvel Jet by Flapper Juno, and I think she is just superb. This is exactly how I understand Labrador type breed to this day. I'm not talking about the details, right? I'm just talking about the general impression of type, and I think she is superb. Yep. Right, the Butters. Right. As far as I can work out, I'm sure I'm right. This lady, Mrs. Butter, was Maurice Portal, that's the owner of Flapper, sister. It's all within the families, it really is. It's a small group of people bringing the breed out. These are working people. This dog has never shown himself. He was basically Buccleuch and Munden, Buccleuch and Tyne Valley in his breeding. 31 of his progeny, stud book numbers, that's his children, mainly for trialing, a few for showing. Yep. Again, this is an image of Peter Fusculate retrieving. Yeah. This is, some of the dogs were very high on the leg at this stage, by our standards. Although some of the field trial dogs still are. Okay, I'll come to it if we can get there. Yep. Patron of Fusculate. This sitting here, it reminds me a lot of that dog from the Buccleuch kennel that I showed earlier. And I'll bring this out as we go along. Yeah? This is a modern field trial champion alive today, and that's 1911. Okay, it's slightly different. No. But, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they are the same type. The field trial people have not changed the type, and the black type has not changed down the generations. Yeah? This is Mr. Twyford, the famous Mr. Twyford, and his urinals. Mr. Twyford and Mr. Twyford's father and his grandfather had made an absolute fortune out of sanitary ware. Because in England, they obviously, in the obviously he died in 1922. So his father and grandfather made a fortune in Stoke-on-Trent in the potteries. All the towns were getting full of people coming in from the country with the Industrial Revolution. Sewers were being built, sanitation was necessary, and it was really a very lucrative business, and they made a fortune. In about 1905 or 6, I think, he decided he was going into Labrador, so he'd be in other breeds first. He rented this place, which is Whitmore Hall, just outside Stafford. It's a hotel now, but I think it's a hotel. But at the back, the dogs' graves are still there. The Twyford graves are still there at the back. I mean, if you ask permission, you can go and see them. Well, I haven't yet, but apparently you can. And he had money, immediately started putting out big advertising bits like this in the yearbooks and the dog handbooks. Yeah. His dogs are very interesting. They are a bit racier than many of the other Labradors. They are very long in neck. They are very much working dogs. And they are still at this stage. We are still at the stage now in which the show world really was tiny. And these people just had working Labradors. Labrador is a working dog that picks up game. That's what he is. He's not a field trial dog. He's not a working test dog. He's not a show dog. Yeah? That was Brayton Sir Richard. That was bought of Andrew Nichols. That was Andrew Nichols' dog. And I think you'll find there, Andrew Nichols there, in the Flatcoat Retriever Registry in the Kennel Gazette 1901. He registered him. But importantly, he was quite an important sire, but he sired this dog champion, Brayton Swift, which at about 8-year-old, Mr. Twyford paid £500 for and bought him off Andrew Nichol, and he was already way past his best. But interestingly, he obviously wanted his bloodlines. Interesting, see this furrow? The old Labradors all had this furrow through here, and you rarely see it now. They've got a much flatter on their head, but there used to be a furrow through there, which is quite distinctive. Yep. This was the famous, this is Brayton Swift's son, the famous, nothing new under the sun again here. Type of Whitmore, I think, was born 1908, it's on the next one, but about 1908. And all the show dogs that I know, the working dogs have good shoulders, the show dogs like them smart, with a bit straighter in front. Yeah? They were at it, go back there. They were at it even then, right? They're straighter in front, straighter in upper arm. This was the best show dog of his day. But he made, and go on. I'll come back. This again is type of Whitmore. When Mr. Cady, who was actually Whitmore's estate manager, well, eventually became estate manager's dog trainer, went to London to a show with Typer Whitmore one day before 1910. There was a guy outside doing drawings on postcards. Can I draw your dog, sir? You know, or 2 and 6, I'll draw your dog, or whatever it is. And so he said, yeah, go on then. And he had this thing, and he took it back to Mr. Twyford at Whitmore after it was over. And he said, look what this guy's done. And it was very good, apparently. So he said, right, well, send him a picture of type down, which is that, and he can do that. Huh? I mean, obviously, he substituted a pheasant for a pigeon, or whatever it is. It's not even a pigeon, is it? And this guy was called Ward Binks. And Ward Binks was really one of the most famous dog artists of all time, very famous drawings. I took this picture on the carpet in the front room of a little house in Wiltshire. Mr. Cady's daughter, who was in her 80s, and her twin brother, who was also in his 80s, and we also met their older brother, who was in his 90s. And I took this picture, literally put it on the carpet and took a picture of it. And she said, I've taken this to Antique Roadshow, and they say it's not worth it. I would have given her money then. I said to her, would you like to sell it? She said, no, it's nothing. She said, no, I don't want to sell it. Actually, all those people are dead now. The sister and the 2 brothers are dead. This was sold in Manchester for 200 quid at auction. I didn't know. I got 10 times that. I don't know where it's gone. We can't find where it's gone. And it's absolute, because this is Ward Binks' first really important painting of Labradors. Yep. Champion Peeps with Whitmore. See, for me, these are perfectly typical Labradors. They might not suit the Crufts show ring today, but these are perfectly typical Labradors. Exactly of the proportions, make and shape and type that we know today. Yep. This is Tag, who won the 1920 championship. Yep. One. And this again is quite interesting because, which is what I wanted to say earlier, which I forgot, it's on the slide too. This again is an article by Croxton Smith, very, very famous dog writer. And Country Life 1915, Mr. Twyford attributes the all-round improvement in the breed to a great extent on the kennel club rule that insisting a gun dog cannot become a show bench champion unless he's previously earned a prize or certificate at field trials. It makes a wholesome rule, a wholesome rule. No dog of his is to be exhibited unless he gives promise of being a first-class worker. And what they tended to do with Type, who was perhaps too beautiful, if you want, to be damaged in working in rough or brambles or whatever, they would try them once, see if they could get at least a certificate or a prize, actually Type 1, a novice field trial, and then you never need to try them again. Right? I proved the point. My dog is dual purpose. He works. Now we'll show him because he can win better in the show. I think this tracker with Whitmore is a lovely Labrador. Perfectly typical. I mean, there are really many modern Labradors look like that. Yeah? This is his one dual champion. Forgive him the terrible picture. The dog isn't happy. But if you can imagine him stood up square, yeah, standing 4 square, he has lovely shoulders, his quarters are fine, he'd be a very handsome looking dog for me. Yeah? This is John Cady, the man that we went to see his children. The thing about these there, again, they're very flat-coated in head. Very flat-coated. Yeah? Now we come to Lorna Countess Howe, the one and only Lorna Countess Howe. 1887, 1961, married first Mr. Quinton Dick in 1908. She was then Mrs. Lorna Quinton Dick, and married when Mr. Quinton Dick died, well, some 4 or 5 years later, to be fair as well. She married Earl Howe, who was her first cousin. Her father and Earl Howe, were first cousins. So effectively, she was Earl Howe's first cousin once removed. Okay, I love, wait a minute, I love these phone numbers. Roland's Castle 11. Yeah, okay. Right, this is Mr. Quinton Dick. Fine looking chap too, yeah? Now, I have to tell you, Mrs. Quinton Dick married Mr. Quinton Dick. I was telling Per this the other day. I got the date wrong, it's 1961 she died, but anyway. This young lady was 21 years, which you have to be, or you had to be in England at that time, to marry somebody without parental consent. She was 21, 18 now, was it 18? She was 21 years and 2 weeks, right, when she married this gentleman, Mr. Quinton Dick, Captain Quinton Dick. He was 61. Ooh! Obviously, it was a love match. Oh God, must be recording. I can also tell you, look, I don't know. All I can say, she may have loved him, she may not, I don't know. But all I can say is when he died in 1922, in trust, because the money was in trust, but he would have a big income. He left £3 million in England in 1922 and more than £3 million in India. So he left £6 million in 1922. He was, when she married him, he was 61 and he was unmarried. He never married before. So I don't know. These are some of the early dogs. Actually, it looks like, sorry, I'm going to say this one. It looks like he introduced her to Labradors because he had Labradors before they married. So, some of the early dogs, coats, loose front, not too good. Okay. She says, in her book, she says, I owe much to Mr. Hood, the Withington man. 1914, I went to see him at his home near Manchester when I was just beginning to get my kennel Labradors together. He gave me much wise advice, and from him that day, in 1914, I purchased Jubileumskonferensen. And this is what she did right throughout her career. She bred very little, very, very little. She bred hardly anything. Whenever she saw anything any good, any dog any good, any show dog any good, any working dog any good, excuse me, she bought it. And if you didn't sell, she wasn't very happy. And she had so much money, and they had so little money, the keepers mainly, because that's what she bought from mainly, not completely. But I mean, she was, let's say, persuasive. Okay? There she is, again, straight front. This is the first champion dog after the First World War, about 1920 made up, I think. And I was saying earlier, I've recently gone onto the British Newspaper Archives, all one word, British Newspaper Archive website. So I think £75 a year or something, and gone back through the newspapers. It's brilliant. And I mean, this picture was probably published about 1920 of her showing Lucky at a show. And I mean, I've never seen it before. It's never been published anywhere. It's just in the newspaper. And the day after the newspaper was thrown away, the picture probably went, you know, and forgotten. Yeah. This again, this is her most famous dog, Bodo. And again, that is from a newspaper. It doesn't look, you know, there are staged images and there are more natural images. And having said that, he's a nicely made dog. You can't compare about it, complain about it. And again, come back to this, because I think this black type just runs right through the whole generations till today. Yeah? And this is Paul on the book. She says this is the perfect head. Other people said he had bat ears, which we've seen now. Yep. You have staged photographs and you have natural. Somebody's just caught her at a field trial somewhere, right? And this is Bolo, and look at him. If he flapped his ears, he'd probably take off. Yeah? Great huge bat ears. Yeah? Now, Mrs. Rosie Williams always said, I don't mind a dip in the back, dear, as long as it's not right close to the backside, because that means weakness. And it is weakness. He's very, very, you know, he dips in exactly the wrong place. I mean, they are dual champions, two of her dual champions. They are not, by modern standards, they are not great show dogs, but I still believe the type is running all the way through. Yeah. Three other, yes, well, two others, because some specs already on there. And not, I think that may be the wrong photograph. These are from Harold Clayton's first book, and I would need to change, I think that is the wrong photograph. Anyway, go on. Again, what I like to do, if I can, is put modern dogs against old dogs. And these are just some pictures of the Bankery dogs and dogs she brought in. Baldwin Painter. This is the famous big winner, her big show winner. 33, I think actually it was 30 cc's. I think she's come miscounted. Anyway, Best in Show of the Kennel Club 1925. And this is Marlene and David Hepper's Martin and Mardas from 1975. for me, I don't know how you see them. I see them as very clearly similar. The type is so clear. Sorry. You did not quite so quick, please.
Sorry?
Okay, come on. Thanks. Right, we have the problem. What do you do when you get an obvious pointer? Because that's what he is, in effect. What you do when you get a dog which is so clearly not very typical. He is clearly long in the leg with weak bone. He's got a single coat. He doesn't have an otter tail. He's clearly a very poor representative of the breed, but he is the best working dog you've ever had. So what do you do? Obviously, you just give him away, don't you? No. And he won the championship, 1926, 28 and 29. By her own admission, he was the best dog, working dog she ever had. But he wasn't very typical. And this is always the dilemma when you're within a breed. When you get something that is absolutely, when you get something absolutely superb working animal or show animal, who for some reason or another is not typical of the breed, you just abandon it? Well, you don't, do you? The reality is you don't. And then, again, when you have an exceptionally good show dog, who will not retrieve, or is, stubborn, is totally unbiddable, what do? Do you give him away to bed? No, not till you make him up. You make him up first and then give him away if you can't live with him. But so it is all the way through that there are compromises. Yeah. This is Ward Binks's. We won't say here long, obviously, but these are Ward Binks's drawing, all down according to the daughter of John of Katie, saying that this is where her dad said to him, "Go on then," and he took the thing back, and then Ward Binks took off, and he used to stay at what's it called? Balmoral for a fortnight or so with the Queen in the, well, not stay with her as such, but he used to stay there and draw the dogs for them. And he went to America, he went to India to the Maharajas to draw their dogs. So he became very famous. This is just that's how the dogs. These are field trial dogs. They are just the same. I think dogs of this type, size, substance would have been shown exactly the same. Yeah. We are still, what I'm trying to say is we are still at a point, for absolute certain, when the breed has not split. It's still together. And one of the ways you can see it's still togetherness, will come in a moment, is they were quite prepared, the field trial people were quite prepared to use show, or they were called show obviously, show champions in the ring on their working bitches, and the other way around, people with very good show bitches were quite prepared to use a field trial champion. This, again, is from the archive. I think he might have a calf lick, I'm not sure. I think he might. And this, again, is Ward Binks. This is probably her best show dog with cross 32 and 33. Yeah. This was 1937, Mrs. Broadley. When Broadley said to me about him, oh, he won't much coverage. And he's not, is he? He really isn't up to the quality of the others. But Countess Howe had such power that she could go best in show at these shows with dogs of mediocre quality. No doubt about that. It is difficult to explain. Nothing went past her. And there's a famous story, slightly rude. Apparently there's no boy called Allbones, and he was a keeper, and his son Allbones, and they had the prefix Alby, A-L-B-Y, which is from the old pedigrees. And he had a monopoly, the dog with one testicle. I'm sure you know what that is. So, I don't know how good your English, but a slang for testicle in English is knacker. Yeah? So he registered him Alby Ivanakaroff. Countess Howe said, "We are not having that." She went to the kennel club, she told him to scrub it out and tell him to pick another name. I thought it was quite good, actually. Go on. She died in 1961. These here are pre-19, about 1918, and again, I think these that on it. Right, we go back. The interbreds and the formation of the Labrador Retriever Club. Why interbreed? Well, basically what happened was the Labradors were recognised in 1903. Within 5 years, at field trials, they had virtually wiped the flatcoats out. There was one flatcoat called Miru in 1912 who won the championship, but she was the only one, past about 1905 or 6, a bit later, about 7 or 8, who could compete with the Labradors. After that, the flatcoats were finished, and they were finished. The breed disintegrated. Not totally, because some of the keepers particularly liked flatcoats. But one reaction from the flatcoat people, who couldn't believe how fast their breed, which had been developed over 30-odd years, was being disintegrated or being overtaken, was to interbreed their flatcoats with Labradors. And the interbreds were pretty much accepted within the field trial domain, because after all, it was about retrieving. So it doesn't really matter if you're pure Labrador or a mixed Labrador or whatever. This is Pitchford Madam. She was half Labrador, half Flat. One of the things, there's a couple of things here. One of the things which you will know from, well, maybe from your experience, if you make something approximately like a Labrador to a Labrador, a lot of the litter, significant amount of the litter, will come out looking like Labradors. Right? And this is partly because short coat is dominant over black coat. Black is dominant anyway in Labradors, it can be. Middle-sized dogs are dominant over big or tall. So basically, a Labrador fits the sort of genetic dominance, if you want to, pretty much. And so then, at that time, within the Kennel Club, you could register a dog as to which breed you thought it most resembled. So, which is, this has been going on for generations. All right, it's a little bit different on that. He was kind of American. Go on. Again, this is bred by Johnson Les Brabham and late Janice Pritchard, who was much missed even today, even though she was awkward and difficult and God knows what. She was a very, very important breeder. Oh God, she's difficult. We went to Denmark, judging me and her, about 20 years ago. Right? So it was getting the end of the day, and I was tired, and she was tired, and she had a plane crash. Right? And it was getting tight. So it was something like, I don't know, best group or something. I don't know. Neither of us cared at this stage. We'd had enough. The tickets had been given. So she wanted one group. There were two groups. She wanted one group, and I wanted the other. She said, my heads are hideous, and I said, your shoulders are. Right? So we have this real go in the middle of the ring between us, right? And the stewards moved away from us. I didn't realise, but they moved away from us, right? And she was really going at me. And in the end, they said, do you bloody want to, Janice? I've had enough. Right? So she did. She did what she wanted to do, right? And then, because she came over, she threw her arms around me, gave me a big kiss, and she said, oh, thank you, Richard. We've had such a lovely weekend, haven't we? And these stewards are like, crazy English judges. And we have, but that was just her. She did say, in terms of hips and stuff like that, this lady was very, very important. I think that dog and that dog are very similar in type. Go on. These are some of the show dogs from the 1926s, 20s, yeah. This, by the time you get to the 30s, you'll start, this is stunning. This is true. This is like the epitome of Labrador type. It's just superb balance, nicely made, that lovely head and expression. Here's the thing, the type, the balance is just stunning. I think, okay? Right, let's go back to some of the field trial dogs. This is a slightly later version, but that in particular was a very, very famous field trial champion. Or Countess Howe apparently said something about the bitch, said, if I'm running a field trial against Chance, I just hope I run before her, because there'll be no game left when she's finished. Because she was such a good working bitch. Highwood is Lady Hillwood. That was her prefix, and she was the niece of the Duke of Buccleuch. Her mother was the Duke of Buccleuch's sister, so the niece. Again, it's the same, families. Go on there. Right, I call this the world we have lost, because this is Pettish Dan, who didn't become a field trial champion, though it's very unlucky, because he only needed one more qualification, I think, or either second or third. But his son, Pettish Shadow, carried the working lives. This, for me, is a world we have lost. These are the heads I like. I think they're wonderful. They're also slightly foxhunted, but I think they're great. Okay? Right, why I put this, that's Lady Hillwood. This is a field trial champion. Again, in terms of type, he's fine. He's just a Labrador. He's not a show dog, he's not a working dog, he's just a Labrador. But look, I put this up particularly, that Edgar Winter, who had dual champion Staindrop Sadie. I love his hat, it's blue. Look, field trial champion, dual champion, so show champion as well, champion, field trial champion, show champion. They were quite prepared to mix up the two lines. The type had not diverged at this stage. By the 1930s, they were still, although there was a field trial type emerging, and although they were tending to go over somebody as important as the Honourable Lady Hillwood, was quite prepared to adapt to have a pedigree like that. He was buying pedigree. Well, he'd actually bred by Mr. Kennel. Yep. Right, let's go on briefly to the yellows if we can. We can okay, got half hour. No. The yellows before 1945. I talk about blacks all the way through, virtually. This is the first image of a yellow in Britain. Ben of Hyde is quoted in some of the books as the first yellow Labrador. He's not. He's the first registered yellow Labrador. They were there long before. because Labradoros come in black, grey, brindle and yellow. So they were there all the time. And this is the first image. This lady was French. She died in 1874, so it has to be before then. She was married to a very rich Northumberland, County Durham coal miner, and she was French, and she came from beautiful France to County Durham and the coal mines. There are some lovely places in County Durham. It's also a very industrial area. And she was so lonely and so sad, he built her a vast, vast mansion in the French style, which is now the Bones Museum, because she was lonely for home. And she also, this is the thing, they've used this as they have amber eyes. And amber eyes were a regular in the show Labradors right down to the 60s. The show people the judges wouldn't have them today, but the field trial people still have amber eyes. And they are right, they glow like amber. Right, this is the dog everybody recognised, the first yellow velvet hide. Although if you see the full pictures, you see that there are long-haired things as well. But he obviously kept them separate. The Yellow Labrador Club, this estate is still going somewhere up. Susie Wiles has got some gin from this estate. They make gin on the estate. And the Yellow Labrador Club got their own gin now with their own labels. And this man is a descendant, I think they call, I don't know whether they call Ratcliffe still. But this is Major Ratcliffe's Yellows. Go on. The point about it, as far as I'm concerned, is while the blacks type comes through strongly, and the blacks were substantial, strong Labradors in many cases, like we know today, this lot, the yellows, weren't. They really weren't. Look at them. They're pretty then, and they're not so bad. But look at these. Look, they're dreadful. Look at the French. Look, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Why did you tell me before? I was trying to be polite. Well, that's no good, is it? But seriously, look at their heads. They are really, really awful things. Yeah. The one there was Danilo, which we looked at earlier, carried yellow. And that was very important. The black Danilo, who's the record holder, Banker Danilo, carried yellow. Which the other dog, many of the early dogs didn't. And this is his son, and this dog actually was very, very important in developing, I know it looks a bit rough there, but he's very important in developing the yellow bloodlines, both in the field trials and the shows. And that picture was probably taken after that picture, and that's a Labrador. So, I mean, for me, there's no argument there, the type is so close. Yep. The one person who did have decent yellows all the way through was Mrs. Wormold. Mrs. Wormold was legendary, Mrs. Wormold. She went on showing into her 90s, and she had a big leather game bag that she used to have on her side, right, when she was showing. And this blooming bag used to flap up and down the ring when she was frightening all the other dogs. And whether she did it purposely or she's totally oblivious, I don't know. But she's a lovely old lady. She was from a military family. And she was, well, I remember she was very, very old. And in the Boer Wars, when the British fought the South African farmers, I mean, this was going to take a couple of weeks, this the British never learned, did they? It took years and years to finally beat the Boers. But she was at Mafeking, and she left or escaped the day before the siege of Mafeking, when the Boers surrounded the British army at Mafeking and sieged them. She got out the day before, so it gives you some context of the times involved. But she had some lovely yellow Labrador. I mean, I think that's superb. Absolutely beautiful dog, so beautifully made. She bred one of the first yellow, she bred that, it's not her prefix, she bred it, right in that. And she was a great, great character. She had solid yellows. And that's Nath, the dual champion Nath Banjo. And Audrey Ratcliffe, Mrs. Ratcliffe's eldest son, said to me, Richard, he was huge, absolutely huge. But she had big, strong yellows when nobody else did. Well, this is Miss Eleanor Buller, had some Badgley prefix, had some quite important yellows. Again, these yellows were dual purpose. They are still, they fail in quality, all the way through still. When Broadley told me that this ivory, she said they were called ivory because she was cream. She said she was one of the first creams she could ever remember. Up to that point they'd been red, but this was a cream. But again, these people had money, as Mrs. Wilmot did. This woman had money, and she didn't train these dogs herself. She sent them to the Rockstead guy, Ronald MacDonald, and he did all the work with them. Okay. The first field trial champion yellow, Haines Danilo, is famous, possibly more famous, for his role in golden retrievers, because one golden retriever, the most famous Hallstone, whose name I've forgotten for the moment, Hallstone golden retrievers, used him on a golden bitch to try and get the working ability of them. And it worked because one of their goldens won the Retriever Championship, I think a granddaughter or grandson of him. And Valerie Foss said to me that this lady, Mrs. Hallstone, whose name I forget, I'm sorry, in her old age, she used to Valerie to talk to her, and she said, "Oh no dear, it never happened. No, we didn't cross the Labrador, dear, it never happened, never happened." But Valerie said it did, it definitely did. This is a picture of a Hawkesbury dog. Major lupus, very important in its yellows. But what I'm trying to say is these in the main, that's nice, I like that, that's a proper yellow Labrador. And this Maid Macpherson lived in the far north of Scotland, and she said in that lovely Legends in Labrador book that when she bought her first Labrador, I think it was Western Reaver he was called, when she got him, when he turned up at the station, because they used to send dogs by train in those days all over Britain, and she got him out, and she said he got a long wavy, wiry coat and whatever, and so when I got him home, my husband said, "You've been sold in mongrel." And she said, "For all I knew, to be honest, I might have been." But she had looked like a Chesapeake, that's what he looked like. But she was a very popular lady, and she had some lovely yellows, field trial champions and show champions. Yeah. Right, again, what I'm trying to look, Kim Perney Cam was by a dog, show dog, out of a field trial champion. Now, who would do that today? This is late 30s. They were quite happy to mix the bloodlines or the show lines and the field trial lines out. I include this here. This is what they tended to look like, some of these old yellows. They had very hard-looking dogs, really hard. They didn't have the class of the blacks. And this thing here, they had a vein. Some of the other blacks must have had it too, but I don't remember them. I can remember on the yellows, we had one. They had a vein through the side of their face here, and they used to call it a whip vein. And it made them look really hard, really ugly and hard. Okay? Right, after 1945, she went on. After the Second War ended, Countess Howe went on until the late 1950s, well, 61, but by the late 50s, her influence was waning. Two things, she died 61, and I think 1958, roughly like that. I can remember my father, we had cockers at the time. My father, we had a cocker of Ware cocker, H.S. Lloyd of Ware, and she was lovely, lovely pony. And he had a pedigree, and all these dogs weren't champions because they hadn't qualified in the field. Mr. Lloyd of Ware did qualify many of his dogs, but towards the end he didn't. And my father got a red pen out and wrote on his pedigree, SCH, on all these champions that are, to make the pedigree look better. I mean, some of them had 50 cc's, like Witch Doctor of Ware, 40, 50 cc's, but he still wasn't a champion, but now he was a show champion. I got the pedigree home still with her. Okay? Right, these are the last four, really. She didn't really have any good field trial champions after the war, but she did have, these are all bought in. And Gwen went to be her partner at one stage, and the trainer, Thomas Gaunt, was a brilliant trainer. Gwen said he was wonderful because he could train the dog one day, be out training the dog one day, and you could take the dog to the show the next day and the dog would show beautifully. You never had to hit dogs or shake dogs up. The dogs just wanted to please him. Or they just did it for him, she said. He just had some sort of magnetic a complete dog man. And Countess Howard, making she wouldn't have had anything like as many goodness, and not being forgotten. He did all the training. But there's some lovely stories. Apparently, Miss Lang, who was now, because Countess Howard's Earl Howard died by now, and she was living with Miss Lang as a female companion. And Miss Lang was a bit feisty, I think, to say the least. And apparently, Gaunt used to have a big bottle of sherry or port from the kennels. And Countess Howe used to come down after breakfast every morning, about 9:30, 10 o'clock, to check on the dogs. And she used to have a big glass of port. And so, stiffener for the day, it's better. All the dogs were bought is virtually. And in the end, this is Gwen, with Countess Howe and Miss Lang. These are the last of the dogs she bought in. She also had Pegs, one more. She had Griffons. She also had field trial champion pointers who won the pointer championship. She had field trial spaniels who won the spaniel championship. She had field trial champion cockers who won the cocker championship. I mean, this lady, it's impossible to explain how powerful she was. Yep, go on. These are the two field trial dual champions, yellows, after the war, and that's Rockstead Foot. This is Dr. Ronald MacDonald, I said trained Miss Fuller's dog. The very, very famous lady who had the Holgate dog, Gabrielle Benson. We went to see her fairly recently. And when she had a son, her father said to her, "I've had enough of you hunting, you're falling off all the time. you're breaking bones, you are now the mother of my grandson, you are not going hunting, riding horses anymore. And she said, well, I'm getting on a bit anyway, and really, I should. So he said, right, I'm going to buy you some top-class working dogs, and you can get into field trialing. And so he took her to see this bloke, Ronald McDonald, as a sort of insight on how to train dogs. And apparently he got out the dog in the paddock, and he sent him, he did this field trial dog, did everything beautifully. And then right at the end, or just as he was finished, the dog had done his retrieve, McDonald got out of the leash and lashed him, hit him hard. And that's sort of on the basis of, that's for doing nothing, wait till you do something wrong. And she said the dog went under the chicken coop and never came out the whole time we were there. And she said, I said to myself, right, I am not training dogs like that. I would never train dogs like that. I would never hit dogs. But he had, her father-in-law bred this dog, Major Benson, and this is the famous trainer Ronald McDonald. But he was rather old school. The last dual champion Banjo died in 1960, and to date, I put to date, but we'll never have another. Okay? What I put this on for, if you can see it, I'm not sure, yes you can. This is the dual champion, but look, champion, field trial champion, field trial champion, field trial champion, champion. And this is Danilo, so that should be champion too, dual champion. This dog, as a dual champion, was a mishmash of working and show dogs. The breed still had not broken away into its two groups, and this is 1947, Midland County Yearbook. Okay? This is a very important dog. Again, I put it up there because it's Donald, Kimperney Cape, champion, Kimperney Cam, field trial, is still a mix. Glenn Headzeiler is in every field trial champion to this day. Every winner, at least every winner, of the International Gun Dog League Retriever Championship has his name in the pedigree, usually lots of times. And he was owned by Mr. Anand, who bred Banbury Painter, I think, for Countess Howe. And he lived in, as you can see, rural Perth in Scotland. And he really, apparently, was a very, very good-looking dog. And obviously, as a keeper, he couldn't afford to go all the way down to London on the train and stay over. So all of his friends, or numbers of his friends, put the money together for Mr. Anand to take the dog to Crufts and to show him at Crufts. And apparently, the dog hated it. He wouldn't be benched, he wouldn't show. And why should he if you lived up there, not a lovely place? Yeah, be taken in the middle of London into a world you'd never seen before and show. I mean, it's asking a lot of him. But, it was a chance, but it's interesting, okay? Right, forgetting the reading for a minute, because I've got to try and get through. This is the last top-winning retriever champion, the last top-winning field trial champion of the very, not just field trial champion, the very top of the field trial champions, who also won a challenge certificate. And this is Lady Hillwood's Highwood Dipper. And Horace Taylor, Wat Stanwell, gave him a ticket, a CC at Windsor in 1958, and he won 1960 Retriever Championship. But he never won any more, and basically, he didn't like mating bitches, and he didn't like being benched. Basically, he's a bit nervous, I reckon. That's what it amounts to. Yeah, that's what it amounts to. But, this is the top winning retriever of 1960, who, in my opinion, is a perfectly good Labrador. Completely typical. I try very hard to be open-minded about the type, and not be narrow-minded that only show dogs are typical Labradors, because they aren't. Okay? This is Holgate Willie. This is Gabriel Benson's absolute best one. Very famous. He apparently could clear a 2-metre high deer fence without touching. He could go straight over a 2-metre fence. And look at the back end on him. You can see probably why he did. And in the 70s, Mary Rosalind Williams took Mrs. Alicia Dede Hepworth down to see the dog, to see Gabriel Benson's Willie, with the idea of using him on a post-dead bitch. And in the end, she didn't do it. And I don't know why. I think it was a mistake. She should have done it. I mean, really, it was 1 litre. Take a chance, have a go. And this, she didn't. But interestingly, Gabriel Benson tried very hard to keep her dogs looking really solid, really strong working dogs. And if she had a really fine bitch, she went to the heaviest good working dog she could find. Okay. Look, these are 1959, 1989. These are field trial champions. And these are perfectly acceptable, solid Labradors. These are not whippets by any imagination. In saying all this, I have to admit, I picked the photos to make my point. Obviously I have, because there are whippets too. But they're also very strongly made, field trial, top winning field trial champion dogs. Okay? Right, I'll just go quickly. I haven't named these. For me, basically what has happened, in simplest terms, I could have done this in 5 minutes this morning. Basically, the working dogs have got slightly finer, and the working field trial dogs are finer, the show dogs are better. That's what it amounts to. But I still think the black type is there, even though there are variations in weight. Go on, Nick. These are working. These are not field trial dogs as such. These are dogs that pick up birds in England. Yeah. I mean, okay, you might like them. You might think they're weedy and whippety. They are Labradors. They are typical Labradors and typical of the working lines that we have in the United Kingdom. And these are modern dogs. Yeah. Our friends from Denmark. I mean, what more do you want? These are lovely creatures. And heads are wonderful. Okay, basically, right. Field trial dogs are lighter, or the show dogs are heavier. I still think, particularly the blacks, are typical. Yeah, go on. Again, we are. This is where I start struggling. I can't quite finish the story properly. This is you won the Irish Field Trial Championship. Probably not live now, obviously. You look at it. No show dogs on this. Field trial champion. All field trial champions. No show dogs at all. And the field trial people have given up on the show dogs. They've gone their own way. Absolutely gone their own way. And in a sense, you can appreciate it, because at the very highest specialised level of the field trial in England, Britain, it is so competitive and so intense. Why would you waste your time and money on training a show dog who may well do quite well for you, actually? He may well do it, because some of the show dogs have made up into field trial champions, because Gaynor Bailey actually had a Poolstead bred 100%, 4th-generation show dog. They made up into a field trial champion comparatively recently. But many of the top-class trainers, and you have to be a top-class trainer to get to that level, won't touch the show dogs. Why should they bother when they've got their own lines, their own proven lines? Okay? Right, look, that is lovely. This is 1990. That's Peter Fascinator. That's our Peclu dog I talked about earlier, but I've horizontally switched him round. It's not me, is it? They are very similar. Again, all field trials. Willie, all of them, all the top field trials. Sydney, especially Tan is there somewhere, I think. Yeah, Swimbrook Tan was also incredibly. The dog on the front of this thing here, this nice booklet, sorry. That, one of those, I think it's that one, is Tan. They are the Swinbrook dogs. Swinbrook is a little village in Oxfordshire. Stunningly beautiful cotswold band. Yeah, go on then. Gone through them fairly quickly. Of course, the white shows up on the blacks. It doesn't show up on the pale yellows, but it's there, right? And the white is on the darker yellows. You see it on the reds. Go on then. And again. These are just field trial dogs. Back, amber eyes. Yep. And again. The picture that's in that book again. And this is Tess Lawrence, and she's had 9 field trial champions in the UK, which is big time. This is big time. And they're lovely, big, strong dogs. They really are some lovely, solid Labradors. So typical. Yep. And this is the Drake's Heads dogs. I mean, you mightn't like them. I think they're perfectly typical, substantial Labradors. They fit in with a type that goes back 120 years. Yep. Again, it doesn't matter. I want to go on to one other thing again. He's perfectly, sorry, go back one. He's a perfectly typical Labrador. He might not win Open Dog across. That's not the point. That's not the point. 100% field trial dog. No show dog anywhere near it. And some of these pedigrees, if you took back some of these 5 generations, no show dogs. You're going back to, in some cases, 10 generations. And they've gone their own way, and the breed split, I guess, when Countess Howe died, then this breed started to split. But at first it was incredibly slow. Really very, very slow. And there are still top winning field trial dogs with show dogs behind them, but the vast majority have none. Go on. Championship train now, go on. Go back one. It's good, is it? I went to school like that, right? Little shorts, and a school cap. Yeah? It's a long time ago. It was 1929, I'm going to tell you. Anyway, field trials haven't changed. They're held in exactly the same way as they've always been held. All that's changed is now they wear barber clothing instead of those big heady great coats. That's all the change. They wear barbers now. Go on. Right. I try and get through this because the last bit I want to tell you, it's only showed then. When Countess Howe was showing that thing, it was an extremely high quality black Labrador, of the very highest quality as far as I'm concerned. I call these the classic black types, and whenever you get one like that in the show ring, in Britain at least, it gets made up. That is the ultimate for me. You get one like that, that's it. You'll get one in your lifetime probably. While she was showing that high quality thing, the yellow people were showing these. They're awful, aren't they? They're awful. They have no quality at all. This is Champion Giant, Swan-Dyke Cream Cracker, very, very influential. That's Kindy Melody. Some of Marion's stuff comes down through the Kindy lines. This is the Poppleton lines, which are behind the Kindy lines. That's Giant, and that's Skeleton Squire Lodge, actually in West Wales. And Mary Roslyn Williams, Judge came, I have the report somewhere, and she said, all of you new people to Labradors must come and look at this dog before it's too late. This is the old-fashioned yellow Labrador. We shan't see these sorts again. They're good, to be honest, because they were, the awful, but they were really poor. Yep, go on. Judith Akeshaw, nicely made, but I mean, they just don't have the sophistication of the modern yellows. Go on. Right, this is my own photograph that has never been seen before. It's a world scoop. And I took this photograph. It was the day my father and I won our first reserve CC at East Anglia Labrador Club in 1972. Diana Beckett was judging. She's still going. She's an old lady. And she had bred this, and she actually given the reserve CC that day. This is Peggy Ray's 9-year-old dog. Right? He's a 9-year-old dog. Crofter. He was the last, for me, of the real hard yellows. They've gone. But they were hard, and I tell you, they were hard. And you could not, temperament-wise, they weren't sweet, so they really weren't. We had one like this with us when we were first married, and we had a bitch it was, there was this Poppleton breeding effectively, and she was living with us, and when Liz was pregnant with our first son, I took the bitch home to my parents, because I could not trust her. I could not trust her with a baby. You know, I mean, I don't think you should trust any dog with a baby, actually. No dog. But most Labradors, you know you're 19, but you never ever. We took her home to my parents, she went back, because I could not trust her with our, obviously, first precious child. So, you don't see them anymore. Boy, it was hard. And Diana's mother, they were living with her mother at the time, Diana's mother said, get rid of him, you go or the dog goes. Right? Apparently he was hard. And Peggy showed me, the last time I went down to see Peggy Ray before she died, we went down and had some time with her. She knew why he was going there because she was dying, and I didn't want to go to the funeral, I just wanted to go and see her. And she showed us, she took in the kennel, and the kennel's sort of here. I could walk into it easily, and there was a roof bars holding, wooden struts holding the roof up, and there's big chunks of the roof bar taken up, of the wood. So that was crafted. You used to jump straight at the floor and like chunks of it. Okay? Go on. Right, we got from there to here. That's Metcalf, I guess you yeah? Bailey guy, and this is what I went to call. I gave him a CC in Ireland. Look, I think I'm not sure. I think that may belong to Franco. I think that's a Lembas dog. They are beautiful, right? If you think they think how far we've come with the yellows, go on ahead. How far we've come, it's all down to this dog. I think this is the dog that Sis Williams told me she ripped apart, tried apart in that ring. He lived and Mary Dixon still lives in Abergavenny, her dad was her dad, usually came for her dad. He was not himself a great dog. He had one CC off Joe Braddon, had a couple of reserves. He was not a great show dog in modern terms, or then even really. He had a pointer characteristics. He had a dish in his face. He dished. He also, his elbows were outside his body, which are pointer characteristics. They're not Labrador characteristics. And if you've ever shown pointers, because Liz used to show, we had a pointer, Liz used to show them. There's some lovely pictures of her showing a pointer in the 60s and 70s. If you ever show pointers, you get out and hold them. they are a pain because they push back on you, some of them. They shove back on you because they don't like being held out. So you have to fight. You're holding them out to get their neck out, and they got their legs in and they're trying to push back at you. And he used to do that with Mary. She had bread in her pocket to bait him, and he used to go back on his legs like that. And this is what I say about having other breeds and looking at other breeds. If you have other breeds, you start seeing things in your own breed, you think, that's not right. Gwen used him, sorry, Gwen Broadley. And when I say Gwen, I'm allowed to say Gwen because she said to me one day, Richard, you must call me Gwen. And if you called her Gwen and she hadn't asked you, she was not happy. And why not? Well, why not? Why should she be happy? Well, when she called you, and my friend Gordon Howells, she said, Gordon, you must call me Gwen. I said, yes, Mrs. Gordon. So she said, until you call me Gwen, I will call you Mr. Howells. Oh, right, all right then. Go on. Gwen used this dog Harvester as an outcross, and the yellows changed immediately. She used an outcross specifically because she was getting so tied into the tan shadow lines with Tandy, Tanita, who else? Tanner, so she sent that to America, Tan, the whole lot of them, she got tan shadow, I can't, there were 10 of them. And, sorry? Truth, of course, sorry, the great Truth, yes. She got so tied into these lines, she thought she needed an outcross. So she went to Harvester, and suddenly the yellow Labradors changed. Suddenly the yellow Labradors changed into these very, very smart Labradors. I think my own feeling is down mainly, not completely, no dog totally dominates the breed. But it was mainly, in my opinion, down to Clive the Harvester. And the yellow Labradors that started off at Crofter, or like Crofter, within a few years have changed into these very smart, very handsome creatures. Their heads have changed too. The stock is very different. Yeah? Well, we're going through this a bit, but look, she got very tight and Truth, Tandy, Truth again, these are full brothers and sisters. So what she did, and this is what essentially the theory of outcrossing, is that she used Harvester as the outcross and then got back into her own lines, the old lines was back to get good. Yeah? Because she had the fresh blood now. And I mean, she did it brilliantly. Mercy, this was the ultimate, really. I mean, this was the one that everybody at the time thought was the best Gwen'd ever had. Sort of thing. I don't think it's true, actually. She was the best show dog she'd ever had. Whether she was the best and most typical Labrador, I don't know. Okay? So, I mean, some of you may remember this dog, Vic and Janet Coles. He had these lines because he was by Charlie Boy. And again, he was like a different world. You know, out see like the showman. Hang on. There's Tandy and Tandy. There's Showman and Sam. Sam and Sam were little brothers. Tandy was Tandy. So they were creating a type, line bred, essentially on the old lines with the outcross. Go on. This is the painting I had in our house for ages. This is the painting that when Mr. and Mrs. Anthony bought into Sandland's kennel and basically said, you send us the bills. You breed the dogs and show them, you send us the bills. They were billionaires on the Forbes rich list. One year, they were in the top 10 richest people in America. Although Mrs. Anthony apparently used to come there with a pair of jeans on and get down the floor of the pubs. You know, she loved the dogs. She genuinely loved dogs. And this is a classic. This is a classic Charlie Boy, Clive Booth Harvester head. Very beautiful, very pretty, much deeper stops, much more work, much more moulding, and people loved it. But a whole set of Labrador people, like Mary Roslyn Williams, Bridget Dockin, all the black people, they never touched these lines at all. They wouldn't touch them. They wouldn't have anything to do with them because they didn't like the heads, which were very different. And I mean, Mary Roslyn Williams had anything to do with them. And very interestingly, she wasn't nasty about anything. It's just I don't like, you know, it's not a Labrador. I've got my own Labrador. I don't. She wasn't nasty. None of them were nasty about it. But they'd seen the type change. I said to Marion this morning, I'm nearly there, actually. I said to Marion this morning, the one reason why Didi Hepworth Poolstead never changed into these very pretty, I call them pretty Labradors. Well, she said, I found out, she told me that she was going to make one of her bitches to Sandler's Charlie Boy. And I said, oh, that's interesting, I'd like one. So when they're born, I will come out and, you know, have a look at them. So she said to me, I saw the show, she had the littlest ball, and said, oh, I'll come and say there's no point. No point. She said, no. So she said, if you want to come and have lunch, you come and have lunch. Right? So I went there, and across the yard were these stunning puppies. And when you got within 5 yards, every mouth was wrong. Every single one was wrong, and by a long way. And she said, she didn't show me nasty. She said, look, it hasn't worked. Whether it's my fault or Gwen's fault, but I'm never going to use those lines again. I'm never touching those lines again. And so she never got these very pretty things, purely by accident. Go on in. Down the line came this dog. And this is very, very heavily related to Charlie Boy and to Gary, that we'll come to briefly next. And also, it's a complete change. Look, he was beautiful. I used him. I have no problem with him. I had a very nice picture out of him. She was one reserve CC as a puppy. She just didn't grow on, but she was lovely. And he had a huge influence in the short term. But he was very different. This is a very different head, shorter forefoots, much shorter forefoots, the work and everything. And also, that is not typical Labrador. This thing round here, these marks, that's not Labrador. Neither is that black there. Go on. Judith's lovely Ovaltine. The heads are very, very beautiful. I'm not knocking it. They're lovely, beautiful, top-winning Labradors. I've judged them. I put them out. But they were different from the old dogs. The yellow, my argument is, the blacks are pretty much, all right, you have to use your imagination, pretty much stayed the same. I think the yellows have changed. Come on. Franco and his Craftsman Act? Yep. The Lembas dog, that's my dad judging Bath. No, Leeds. Judging championship show, judging a championship show Leeds. That's Dorothy Gardner. We're champion Novacroft Charles. And they were straighter in the shoulder than the dogs that preceded them. And the black dogs they were in competition with had better shoulders than the modern yellows. But the modern yellows with their straighter shoulders look incredibly smart. They really are very eye-catching. They really take your attention. I mean, that's stunning. When you see that on a sunny day in England, it does happen, sunny days in England, like here, occasionally, you have a sunny day, you have them on a big green grass ring, and they look beautiful. They really take, and if they're showing, go on then. Right, so, Lembas Chiquita, about 1910, that's where we're at. This is where we get from with the yellows. Rough old yellows. This thing here, Alan Taylor, the Bell Rider Sandilands guy, a Bell Rider, one of the most famous talking prefects of all time. He thought this dog was dreadful. He used to go on and on about him. A dreadful dog. He's awful, common. Look, he's common. And, you can see exactly what he's talking about. And they are common compared to that. But these are old-fashioned yellow true Labradors. Well, this is the one of the few black people, the Kernafane lady, what's her name? You told me the other day. Harrison, Mrs. Harrison. She used one of the black, well, most of the black people wouldn't use it. They got this lovely sculpted head. That Didi Hepworth Poolstead Fund Clinical. That's what I like. Yeah. That's what I like. But that is beautiful. Go on. Right, the other outcross that Gwen did, and I've done my 2 hours now, but 5 minutes I'll stop. Gwen also got to had a problem with pigmentation. And the Garshannon dogs had excellent pigmentation. So she decided to use Garvel of Garshannon, who was owned by Frank Whitbread, and I can't find a picture of this dog. I do have it somewhere, but I can't find it. So I've taken this from Legends in Labradors, and these are the hills, Garshannon. And Gwen used Garvel. Garvel was an absolutely superb moving dog. He used to move on his hocks, tick-tock, 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 like that. He was superb. Labradors don't move. They don't. They wobble on their hocks. Right? They're molosses, essentially, descended from Labradoros. They're not strong on their hocks, and they're not ideal. They're big, heavy dogs. This lot, what is it? It's not a Labrador. It's a foxhound. The foxhound, the English foxhound. It wasn't then. Go on. Basically, this is Sanders, Gary. Basically what happened during the war was that Mr. Uthwaite Poppleton decided he was going to improve the weedy yellows, which we've looked at, by using a foxhound cross, and he did. And he got away with it in the war because nobody was checking. And basically, because Labradors breed so strongly to their own type, very quickly he got rid of the foxhound type, at least up to a point. He used to give the ones he didn't want to the local hunt, and they used to take him on as foxhounds. And Gwen was brilliant. I got to tell this story, even though I've taken up time. I said one day to her, years and years ago, Gwen, didn't Mr. Ruthwaite use a foxhound? Oh, I wouldn't know, dear. See, but the thing was, I learned this over the years. You shut up, right? You shut up and wait. So you could walk off at that point, or say something else. Yes, shut up. So I said, do you use foxhound? Oh, I wouldn't know, dear. I never went there. I had some friends who went there. Right? You could see it through shut up. Right? She said, apparently it's a lovely place. I mean, this was in the 40s. She said, all brick kennels, wonderful bars. It's really a lovely, lovely setup he had there. But I never went there. She said, I was told that he had some kennels up by the house where the Labradors were, and he had other kennels down the bottom of the field. And, but I never went there. She had, some friends told me once that when she went there to make a ditch, the kennels down the bottom of the field, you could hear baying. But I don't know whether I never went there. So I said, okay, so he used foxhounds, did he, Greg? Oh, I wouldn't know, dear. She's brilliant, right? She wasn't going to tell me so that I could go and say, oh, Gwen said, you know, but as much as I need. Anyway, look, I'm not. This dog is a long time dead. Erica will hate me for saying it, probably. She knows it as well as anybody else, because she knows exactly what she's got, even if she doesn't tell you. But look, he is not a Labrador, as such, there's foreigners there. Go on. But out of this, Gwen then got this, and she got the dark pigment. She got rid of the outcross essentially as soon as she could, back here, and then brought in Truth, Tandy, Tanita, her strong lines again. She's done exactly the same thing again. You outcross, and then you get back into your own lines as quick as you can. And then she had this lovely thing, lovely creature, won Cruft CCs twice, I think. She won Cruft CC. And she said to me, after the 1970 and the Antonys hadn't quite bought in then, just within a few months, she said to me, that won't happen again, Richard. Or, what do you mean? I'm never selling one as good as that again. I've got the money now and I don't have to. Go on. Look, this is Judith. That's me. I'm sorry about the trousers, a bit tight. Leicester Championship Show, 1978. And this is Jeannie, and she's very lovely. She's the only one of this breeding, Charlie Boy breeding, that ever qualified in the field. The only one, which tells you something, right? Possibly about temperament. But lovely clean lines. Wonderful clean lines. Go on. And this is Hazelnut again. Absolutely the biggest winner of all time. Lovely clean lines. But they come down through Gwen's lines and the crosses. I mean, you look at that stunning creature against some of the old yellow dogs. And I think the outcross is created. Go on. Judith spun gold. And go on. Why I put this on here, and there's just 2 more slides to go, or 3. Judith Charlton has been a very, very clever breeder indeed. She is one of the top breeders in Britain by a long way, except she doesn't normally have males. She keeps females. And it's the males that make kennel names. It's the males that make you known. But look, it's Old Smoky, Old Smoky, Old Smoky, Old Smoky. She's breeding to type, she's line breeding, she's trying to maintain a type and doing it brilliantly successfully. Yeah? Erica, look. It's a while ago. Well, it's 36 years ago. This is April Fool. He damaged himself. He never got made up. He would have easily. He got the head from Played with Haffer and Charlie Boy, the lovely work. He got the dark pigment from Garvel and Garshaman. She had black hair, didn't she? Go on. Now, let's make this absolutely clear, and please listen to me, every one of you. I am not criticising this dog, right? I am not criticising. I mean this seriously, because I have judged this dog and he is lovely. He's absolutely top-class show dog, absolutely. I saw him recently at a show, he only got 3rd, I thought he looked wonderful, and I haven't seen him ever look so good. But look at the way that some people that we are now breeding, there are 62 names on a 5-generation pedigree, yeah? There are 62, and there are 61 dogs on there. There are 61 names on there for 62 things. There's no line breeding. There's nothing. Now, I'm not criticising him. Please, I think he's lovely. Next one. And again, this dog is equally lovely, this Ramsey dog. There's 61 names on a 62 pedigree. You might as well, for me, this is different. You put all the dice in a box, shake them up. Yeah? I'm not criticising the dog. I'll say it. You'll go on Facebook in 5 minutes, I know. But I am not. I think they are lovely, lovely dogs. But we have moved on from the old way of breeding. Some people have. Marion will tell you more this afternoon that she hasn't. Go on, briefly. But there are huge differences. I think when you get to this point, I think you've gone too far. When you get to that point, you've gone too far. That point, okay, I can take that. That's lovely. Okay, Liz? Look, I'm not criticising them. As long as these people look after them and make sure they're healthy, that's up to them. Go on. Obviously, the patronage of the Queen in Britain has made a huge difference. You know, this lady, whether you're royal or not, this lady is hugely respected, and she loves her field trial dogs. All this, if she wasn't Queen, she'd just be a country lady in a big mansion somewhere, training her dogs and riding on horses. Yeah. There we are. That is Dora Lee Bonifant. I think it's good, right? And actually, they got lovely quarters. Fine. Thank you very much.